The story begins with our female lead Sola, who was talking to her boyfriend Lee, and Lee had a cat in his hands. Sola doesn't like cats at all, but Lee is allergic to cats, so Sola takes his cat with her. Bringing the cat home, she goes to take a shower and undresses there, thinking that it's just a cat, so why feel shy? A scene from 15 hours earlier is shown when Sola had woken up and her friend told her that Lee had come back and had broken up. Hearing this, Sola got happily ready and went to the office, thinking everything was good in life now. Lee came to meet Sola near the office, but Sola left without saying anything. Then Sola remembered the kiss that happened with Lee, after which Lee never called her. In the evening, when Sola went to Lee's cafe, Lee's ex came to return his cat. Since Lee was allergic to cats, Sola brought the cat home with her. Now the scene comes back to the present where Sola is showering, and our meow turns into a human. He was just about to open the door and leave when Sola comes back, and he turns back into a cat. While sleeping, Sola keeps disrespectfully kicking him off her bed, but he was stubborn and kept trying to come and sleep near her again. At night, Meow turns into a human again, and when he opens the door and goes outside, he gets scared and comes back inside. After Sola leaves for the office, Meow turns into a human again and tries to do human-like things. Then he sees Sola's father unconscious, and he doesn't know what to do with him. He picks him up and takes him outside, but when he sees the guards, he turns back into a cat. Sola gets a call from the hospital, and she goes to the hospital to see her dad. There she meets her father's girlfriend, and seeing her take care of her father, she leaves from there. On the other side, Meow didn't know the address of the house, so he sat outside. When he sees Sola coming, he turns into a human and starts following her. Sola sits down on a bench, and Meow sits behind her too, exactly like Lee. Thinking it's Lee, Sola starts telling him what's on her heart, that she was very upset seeing her father's girlfriend. After speaking her mind, thinking it's Lee, she tells him to leave from there. But just then, she gets a call from Lee, and she sees that it's Meow sitting behind her. Sola asks Lee, "Did you come to me?" To which Lee says, "I didn't even go out today." Sola gets worried, wondering who she had been talking to for so long. Lee starts getting concerned about Meow, and this makes Sola angry. She tells Lee, "Give your cat to someone else." Here, Lee also tells Sola not to abandon Meow again like the last time. But Sola doesn't understand what he is talking about. When did this happen? Actually, when Meow was little, Sola had taken him with her after seeing him wandering outside. She had fed him, and then went to the locker to get something, but during that time, Meow ran away and went far. In the present, we see Sola, who was about to sleep, and Meow comes near her, but Sola keeps shooing him away. After Sola falls asleep, he turns into a human again and thinks while looking at her, "It's because of Sola that I can become human." Sola's father had sold his apartment for his wedding, which had left Sola quite upset, but her stepmom was very nice. She gave Sola the key to her son's empty, big house. When Sola goes to her new house, it was right in front of Lee's cafe. She didn't want to tell Lee that she lives in front of his cafe, so she avoids him and goes into her house. When Sola goes to the office, she forgets her phone, but even after coming back home to get it, she gets so busy with Meow's tasks that she forgets to take her phone again. Meow turns into a human, follows her quietly, slips her phone into her bag, and comes back. As soon as Sola leaves, he turns back into a cat, but when he comes home, he turns into a human again. He can't understand how he is becoming human even though he is not around Sola. Sola works in the office all night, and just as she finishes in the morning, it starts raining. Meow, who had been waiting for her, sees the rain and brings an umbrella outside for her. While taking the umbrella, it slips from his hand, and he turns into a cat again. When he goes near the umbrella, he turns back into a human. He tries this 2 or 3 times and finally understands that when he is around Sola or her things, he becomes human. He goes to pick up Sola, and he sees her with Lee. Lee offers to drop Sola home, but she didn't want to give him her address, so she keeps diverting the conversation. But after he asks several times, Sola ends up giving him her address. At that point, Lee touches her hand to check her fever, and seeing this makes Meow sad. When Sola reaches home, she takes care of Meow and gives him a name, Hanju. After finishing her work at night, before going to sleep, So-la checks on Hanju, and seeing his poor health, she immediately takes him to the doctor. After bringing Hanju home, she takes good care of him, and after she falls asleep, Hanju takes care of her because So-la had a fever due to exhaustion. When So-la comes home, she sees Hanju wandering on the roof. Seeing this, So-la gets very worried and starts climbing up to get him, but Hanju had already come down. Seeing Hanju, she starts coming down, and at the same time, her foot slips. But before she falls, Hanju comes and catches her. So-la apologizes to the boy and starts looking for Hanju. But when she turns back, neither the boy nor Meow is there. But then, while going home, she sees Meow and also returns home. The next day, when So-la is leaving for the office, it becomes very difficult for Hanju to wait at home for her. So, he takes So-la's brush and follows her. So-la thanks him for that day, and at Hanju's request, she buys him a meal in return for saving her life. She gets on the bus to go to the office, and Hanju sits with her. But he doesn't have the fare, so he reminds So-la that he saved her life, and So-la pays his fare. Meanwhile, Hanju starts playing with the doll attached to So-la's bag, which makes So-la feel weird. She goes to the office and Hanju, who didn't have money, walks home, so he falls asleep as soon as he arrives. When So-la returns home, before going to bed, she can't find her brush, and she also sees the doll she gave to the boy in the bus that morning, which scares her, so she goes to Lee. When Lee comes to her house, he looks around and finds everything normal, and So-la's brush is found with Hanju. Due to Hanju, Lee starts sneezing, so So-la sends Hanju out the window. Then Lee and So-la start kissing, and just then, Hanju turns into a human and comes in. As soon as Hanju enters, he tells Lee to leave, which makes Lee angry, and he says, "Who are you to throw me out of my friend's house?" At that moment, So-la's stepmother calls her and tells her that her son has returned. So-la thinks Hanju is her son, and hearing this, Lee silently leaves. The next day, So-la had to go shopping, so Hanju goes with her. When he sees fish, he goes crazy and wants to take all the fish. But when it comes time to pay, how can a cat pay? And once again, So-la has to pay for him. Lee comes to So-la's house, and So-la asks him, "Why didn't you come back that day?" She was referring to the day when she and Lee kissed, and Lee had promised to meet her in the evening. Lee doesn't give her any answer. So-la asks again, "Can't we be together again?" Lee doesn't respond to this either. So-la goes to his house to get an answer to her question. Here, we find out that Lee was coming to meet So-la that day, but on the way, he saw Meow wearing a scarf, the same scarf So-la had put on him. Someone had left a note with the scarf saying, "Whoever needs this can take it with them." Lee thought So-la had written that note, and since he was an orphan, it hurt him deeply. He thought, if a girl can leave her cat like that, she can leave me the same way in the future. That's why he didn't come back into So-la's life from that day on. Even in the present, after So-la repeatedly asked him for an answer, Lee didn't tell her anything. So, So-la says, "I won't chase after you anymore." Then she starts crying, and Hanju, who has now mostly stayed as a human, comforts her. Hanju, who now needed money as well, started working in a restaurant. So-la goes on a blind date, and Hanju happens to be there as well. Both of them wait for their respective dates, but they soon realize that they are each other's date. Afterward, they go to the market, and because of Hanju, So-la wins many dolls in a game, which makes her very happy. When they get home, they find Lee there. Lee realizes that the two of them went on a date. At that point, Lee tells So-la to send Meow away to someone else, which makes Hanju very sad. He plans to stay as a human permanently so that this back and forth situation ends. Hanju asks So-la for some items to remain a human, but this wasn't a permanent solution, he needed a permanent fix. Meanwhile, Lee learns that the person who was supposed to take in his cat is pregnant, so she can't take care of the cat right now. On the other hand, So-la finds it very difficult to send Meow away, so she decides to keep him with her. But then a twist occurs, the son of So-la's stepmother returns. Hanju tells So-la that he likes her, but So-la ignores him. At this point, Hanju feels his presence is in danger because everyone there thinks he is So-la's stepbrother. Poor Hanju tries to stop So-la from meeting her stepbrother by playing hide and seek with her. When Sola sees him, she thinks he's a friend of Hanju's. Hanju sees Sola's scarf with Lee, and when he asks, Lee tells him the reason for Sola and Lee's breakup. Sola comes to the cafe to pick up Meow and, seeing her scarf, asks about it. Lee tells her the reason for their breakup. Sola feels very sad hearing this, realizing that Lee didn't trust her and never even tried to clear things up. Crying, she leaves, and Lee also feels regret, but it was too late, there was no use crying over. Sola's stepbrother meets Lee before leaving, and that's when Lee finds out that Hanju is not Sola's stepbrother, but rather, the real stepbrother is someone else. Lee goes to their house and asks Hanju, "Who are you?" Hanju, seeing that Sola isn't feeling well, gives Lee water and then leaves. When Lee follows him, he sees Meow in the room and can't believe his eyes. He convinces himself that the guy must have gone out of the window. Lee becomes convinced that Hanju is actually a cat, and he starts to tell this to Sola. Meanwhile, Hanju, hiding in his cat form, sees that something is about to fall on Sola, so he turns back into a human to save her. Now Lee sees this with their own eyes. Lee talks to Hanju. With no other option, Hanju tells the truth. Lee offers him a job at his cafe, where they continue to have their sweet and sour fights. Sola was waiting for Hanju when suddenly Meow gets kidnapped. Lee finds Hanju's locket and tells Sola, and the two of them start searching for him. They find out about a man who has a hobby of collecting cats. When Hanju, in cat form, turns back into a human in front of the man is shocked. Hanju tells the man to release the cats, and they get into a fight. Just then, Lee and Sola arrive. Seeing them, Hanju turns back into a cat. The man is completely stunned, with his eyes practically popping out. Hanju and Sola were getting closer, but then Sola gets a call from her stepmother, who says, "I'm so happy that you and your brother are living happily." Hearing this, Sola gets worried because she still thought of him as her stepbrother and believes her stepmother will never let them be together. Sola talks to Meow, sharing her feelings that if Hanju wasn't her stepbrother, she would have told him how much she likes him. Just then, Hanju appears in front of her and says, "I'm not your brother," and after saying this, he kisses her. Hanju finds a kitten who turns into an old woman and tells him that she also loved a human and still loves him, but their love remained incomplete. Cats have shorter lifespans, that's why she will soon complete her life and dies, but humans stay young for a longer time and live much longer than cats. The woman tells Hanju, "Never tell your love that you're not human but a kitten." Hanju discusses this with Lee, and Lee advises him to leave Sola because Hanju was going to die soon anyway. However, Hanju didn't want to leave without telling Sola, but he felt that he should let her go. He wanted to spend one more full day with her. Sola also senses from his words that he is planning to leave, so she becomes very sad and says, "After Snow White was kissed, her new life began, but my fate is that after a kiss, everything ends in my life." Sola goes to the office crying, and Hanju tells Lee that he wants to spend a few more days with Sola. When Sola comes home in the evening, she is very happy to see Hanju. She buys him a phone too. On the other hand, Lee starts feeling jealous of Hanju and goes to tell Sola, but when he sees Hanju there, he becomes angry. Lee tells Hanju to leave Sola soon, but Hanju says he will tell Sola the whole truth. Sola's stepmother calls and tells her, "My son has come back," which shocks Sola, as she thinks, "How can that be, when he's with me right now?" Sola thinks she must have misunderstood something. Just then, it's time for their train. Sola and Hanju were going to meet her mom and dad, as they had called them. Then Lee also shows up. Sola asks him about the cat, as she had asked him to take care of it. Lee says, "It's with you," but Sola thinks he's joking. But when her mom comes to pick her up, Hanju turns back into a cat, and Sola thinks he left without saying goodbye. Sola goes to her mom and dad's house, and she is quite surprised to see her stepbrother there, at which point Lee tells her everything. After asking Lee, Sola comes to meet Hanju, and she sees him turning into a cat. It was very difficult for her to accept this, so she becomes very sad and pulls her hand away when Hanju tries to hold it. Seeing this as an opportunity, Lee confesses his love to Sola, which makes Hanju sad too. Hanju, seeing Sola's anger, starts living with Lee. Sola becomes very sad, remembering Hanju. She couldn't forget him, nor could she keep him with her. In this sadness, she gets a fever, and Hanju takes care of her. Sola asks him if he really turns into a human because of her, and Hanju says yes. Sola then asks him when he used to become human, and Hanju tells her it was when she felt lonely. Sola tells him, "I still feel lonely," and Hanju hugs her. Sola asks him if there's still anything he hasn't told her, and Hanju tells her, "I have very little time left, and I will die soon." Sola and Hanju spend a lot of time together and have fun. Hanju's health started to deteriorate because he kept drinking coffee to stay awake. Since he turned back into a cat when he slept, he wanted to spend as much time as possible with Sola as a human. Poor Hanju waited all day for her after she went to the office. Sola introduces Hanju to her friends, and they start asking, "Who is this? What does he do?" To which neither Hanju nor Sola had an answer. Hanju gets tired and falls asleep there, turning back into a cat, and Sola takes him home. Just then, the man who had seen Hanju turn from a human into a cat arrives. He tries to take Hanju away from Sola because he wants to show the world how a cat can become human. He pushes Sola and tries to take Hanju away, but Sola jumps into the car with him and forces him to stop the car. The man gets out of the car and starts running away, but Hanju turns into a human and stands in front of him. After dealing with the man, Sola takes Hanju to the doctor, who tells him to get as much rest as possible. That's when Sola finds out that Hanju had only a little time left as a human, which he spent waiting for her. Learning this, Sola resigns from her office and starts spending as much time with him as possible. One day, Hanju takes Sola out and tells her that this is the last time he will be able to turn into a human. Hearing this, Sola starts kissing him like crazy. Hanju says that if he had known this would be the end, he would never have come in front of Sola, but even as a cat, he would stay with her. Then he kisses her one last time. 2 years pass and poor Sola waits every day for Hanju to turn back into a human. Sola had become a famous writer, and people would come to her for autographs. Lee proposes to Sola, but she wants to keep living while waiting for Hanju. Her waiting pays off, and one day, Hanju returns as a human. Sola happily runs up to him and welcomes him, and with their happy faces, our story ends.